Welcome to Wisdom for Life, where we sit through philosophy to find practical advice that you can use in your everyday life. Hi, I'm Dan Hayes, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Greg Sadler, and today we're going to be talking about
going back to considering AITA cases. Now, that's an acronym which requires a little bit of explanation if you're not in the know with that. And so, Dan, why don't you tell them what it is? You're a little bit more Reddit. What would you call it? You spend more time on there than I do. Yeah. And I think understand the ins and outs of it better.
A long-time Redditor.
Okay.
The narwhal bacons at midnight, for all those who are in the know. So this is a forum, or what we call a subreddit on Reddit, which is, am I the a-hole? And so there's basically a whole bunch of people kind of like, what is that? You're sending a letter to your newspaper and have someone give their opinion on it, but it's like 1,000 opinions because it's a forum. So everyone goes and is like, I have this thing that happened. I feel like I'm not the a-hole usually, but maybe I am, and I need someone to tell me if I was the a-hole or not.
Yeah.
And so this is how the forum works. People will say, they'll give their responses, but they always start off with, you're the a-hole, you're not the a-hole, everyone here sucks, or no one is the a-hole. And so we're going to be doing a very similar thing, but with our own little philosophical twist.
I like that, what would you call it, comparison that you're making to letters to, not to the editor, but to advice columns, right? You would write Dear Abby and you'd say, I'm not sure my mother-in-law is angry at me, but maybe I'm actually in the right here. Can you fill me in on that? And you're right. It represents a kind of democratization that the internet afforded us, right? Instead of having single experts who tell us everything, anybody can weigh in, and they can, sometimes display themselves as a-holes in doing so in the comments, right?
I was like, you're going to prioritize that? Ooh, okay.
And I like these in part, and I think you do too as well, because they're like ethics cases. You can use them and say, well, hey, what do you think about this as sort of conversation starters? I know I've shared some with my wife sometimes and said, well, what's your take on these people? And I mean, everybody likes to cast judgments, right? So we get to put ourselves in the place of the moral arbiter, deciding whether somebody is a good person, a bad person, kind of mixed. Did they do the right thing, the wrong thing? Who else did the right thing or the wrong thing? Were they provoked? All of these sorts of things that are really part of our ordinary moral life. And, another thing I like about these, as somebody who's like a professional ethicist, is a lot of times the examples that we get like in ethics classes and ethics textbooks, they're kind of artificial, right? These, on the other hand, are like literally not ripped from the headlines, ripped from diaries. People are spilling their guts, oftentimes about rather intimate matters. And sometimes they're quite humorous. As a matter of fact, the first one that we're going to look at is a pretty funny one. So
yeah, it sounds like these guys are quite fun guys.
Yeah. Do you want to lead right into that one?
Yeah, before I go there, we often find ourselves able to look at ethical dilemmas easier if we're not in the middle of them. And so this is kind of a place where we can kind of maybe hopefully sharpen some of our skills at looking at these things and thinking, okay, I have no stakes on the line here, and I can make a judgment about like how good or bad this particular action was, without having to deal with the actual repercussions of it. And hopefully this allows us to, at least when something similar happens, be able to potentially deal with it in a more thoughtful manner.
Yeah, that's actually, I mean, could they have that guy's like me sort of aspect to them, you think? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at least some of them. Some of them are quite out of left field, though.
That's true.
Let's get to let's get to this first one, which is, am I the a-hole for planting a mushroom in my roommate's dirty dishes to make a point? I, a 25-year-old male, have a roommate, Jake, who is a 26-year-old male, who has a serious issue with leaving dirty dishes in the sink. We've had several discussions about this, but nothing changes. The mess was getting out of hand, and it was really starting to affect my mental state. Last week, I decided to take a more extreme approach to make my point. I found a mushroom growing outside and decided to plant it in one of the dishes that he had been in the sink for a couple of weeks. I thought maybe actual fungus growing in the dishes would make him realize how bad things had gotten. Did not mean to cause any drama, but Jake's girlfriend ended up finding the dish first. She was horrified, and the situation led to a big argument between them. Apparently, this incident made her realize how much of a slob Jake is, and it ended up being a breaking point from their relationship. Now Jake is furious with me, blaming me for his breakup and calling me a jerk for creating such a situation. I really don't intend things to escalate like this, but at the same time, his habits are disgusting and need to change regardless of whether his dishes are fertile ground for portobellos. I feel bad about it, so I texted his girlfriend to explain that it was a joke, but she's had it with him and seems to be done whether it was real or not. I'm worried that this is going to ruin our friendship with Jake, but at the same time, don't really feel it's all on me. Our friends seem to be siding with him. Am I the a-hole or not?
This is actually, yeah. What do you think about this one? I mean,
he's a very tiny a-hole.
Okay, I was going to say I'm not inclined to think of him as an a-hole at all.
No, like, I think the breakup would have happened regardless. This was just, like, obviously, there was a number of things that were going on with that relationship, and she probably saw the other slobbishly things that he's been doing, and, this was just the
proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, yeah.
Exactly. It's kind of funny, but it's also, like, not the most excellent thing you could do. I don't know. It's hard to deal with a roommate that isn't living up to certain cleanliness standards.
I mean, this is really excessive. It's one thing if you leave dishes in the sink a day, 2 days, 3 days, but this guy says that his roommate has been leaving stuff in the sink for weeks. I mean, maybe that's an exaggeration. We don't really know. But, to put a mushroom in there, it only really makes sense if the stuff's been there for a while. So even a week is too long to have a sink cluttered full of dishes. And, if he's, so going back to the girlfriend thing, right? Mm-hmm. If he's a slob in that way, to that level about dishes, he's probably doing that with laundry. He's probably doing that with, like, cleaning the bathroom. He's probably doing that with personal hygiene. So I imagine this is not, like, the first thing that this roommate has done. And these guys are in their mid-20s, so it's not like they're 18-year-olds. They should kind of have their act together by this point, don't you think?
Absolutely. Like, I think I've said it before in the past that I lived in a engineers fraternity in college, and it was always this, like, when the new, sophomores would be usually the youngest people that would move into the house, and they'd have to find a place to, like, we had a whole bunch of rules for, like, how things are kept clean. Otherwise, it's with 20 people living in the building that was going to have a very big issue.
Yeah.
So we, there needs to be rules, especially when you're living with other people, because you can't be letting your mess affect other people's ability to just live regularly in their own living space.
Now, I'm kind of curious. So the stereotype of engineers is that they love rules and order and structure and all of those sorts of things being made very clear. Did it work out like that with these engineers?
For the most part.
Okay.
Like, within, like, it was actually surprising. how quickly they got on board. We have a very rigid, schedule. If you're not doing the things, you get fined. And mostly it was just people hadn't ever done laundry for themselves.
Oh, really?
Before that moment.
That's interesting.
Or cook for themselves before that, and so there was a learning curve for them. They got over it and they got in line.
Yeah, I mean, learning how to do laundry is not that tricky. You screw up your whites with washing them with something red once, and you've learned your lesson. I suppose there's probably things about accommodating yourself to a laundry room where other people want to get their stuff done, and you got to get your stuff out of there quickly.
Right.
But those all seem like fairly easy, straightforward things. Cooking, that takes a bit more, right? I mean, unless you're just making mac and cheese.
Which a lot of them did at first. You think it's a whole bunch of college students. But obviously, the big thing was once you're done cooking, you need to deal with the dish in some way, whichever dishes that need to be done, within basically a couple hours of you doing it. If you eat and then you go into the living room or the dining room to eat, you gotta put the dish back and make sure all your kitchen stuff is out of the way of any other person that might need to use that space. But then there's a schedule for cleaning the bathrooms and as well as the kitchen, and everyone did their part, and it maintained itself well enough.
Well, that's good. So, coming back to this case, you think he's a little bit of an a-hole. I think he's probably not at all. I think the roommate definitely is, though.
Oh, yeah, roommate's totally an a-hole.
Now, what about these friends? That's the wrinkle, right? The friends are blaming the poster and saying that he's ruined Jake's relationship with his girlfriend.
I wonder if they've been to their apartment together or not. How aware are they of Jake's
proclivities?
Yeah. Maybe they think it wasn't that big of an issue. Maybe Jake is framing it as I had dishes out a couple of days and he stuck a mushroom in it. I could see someone trying to act in a way that makes themselves look good.
Yeah, I mean, let's say that they do know the living situation really well, these friends, right? So they're close friends of both of these guys. Does that change it at all for you? I mean, it
doesn't change who's the a-hole, but we were talking about the friends.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to say, okay, if they actually know the situation and they're siding with the slob against the guy who's not a neat freak, but just, being reasonable, there's something wrong with those friends.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, but this comes down to the reason why I say that the original poster here is a tiny bit an a-hole.
Okay.
Is he's playing a prank. He is making it look like something that is not true is true.
Right, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. He's creating something that is deceptive. Now the question is, okay, it is deceptive, but is it deceptive like a joke? When I tell a joke about somebody, I don't know, let's say I joke about somebody having a gigantic head, right? And they don't actually they've got a kind of large head, but it's not, massive. We actually in the Army used to tell head so big jokes, and we would say things like, your head's so big that when it rains, the 7th Fleet does exercises in the bald spots or stuff like that, right? Obviously that is not supposed to be taken as true. But I guess, okay, so the mushroom, it's something plausible, right? There could be a mushroom growing in.
Could be. Yeah. But once again, it's not the reality of the situation. And it's he obviously has said that he's had conversations with his roommate to deal with it, and that hasn't solved the issue. And so, I don't know, at what point in time is, there's basically a small lie to try to, get him to, do the things that he ought to be doing in the roommate relationship.
It just had
it's a small lie.
It just had some unexpected collateral damage, which was already kind of primed for taking place.
Right.
Okay. Well, now I'm curious to get your take on this next one. I already have this one kind of thought out. Am I the a-hole for scolding my husband for not buying shampoo and, with the and in all caps, conditioner? So here's the story. A couple weeks ago, my husband went grocery shopping. I sent him a coupon for buy one, get one free for Suave for me. The picture on the coupon was the shampoo. So he buys 2 shampoos, and I got mad at him because he should have known that I use both shampoo and conditioner and should have bought 1 shampoo and 1 conditioner. He did offer to go back and pick up the conditioner, but didn't, and I had to order one online. My husband says it was just an honest mistake. Am I the a-hole for being mad at him? I feel like he should know me better. To add some context, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and we've been married for 13 years. We have 3 kids. They're all in school. I feel very worn down, and my mental load is over the top. Part of this is that having to point out that I need shampoo and conditioner, again with all caps for the and, just adds to that load and makes things worse for me. I feel like he should know me better to take the load off. So, what's your initial response to this? Is she the a-hole? Is the husband the a-hole? What do you think?
Well, okay. First thing, the easy thing is that the husband's a little bit of an a-hole because once the issue was pointed out, he said he would go back and pick it up, and he didn't do that.
Yeah.
So that's the easy part. He made a commitment to his wife and then failed to uphold that commitment. The next thing is, it's very easy to fall into my spouse or my significant other should be able to think what I'm thinking or should know me this way. But we know that communication breakdown happens all the time.
Yeah.
And so, yes, he made a mistake in that thing, and I feel like better communication could have solved the issue in the first place. So maybe she's a little bit of an a-hole in that regard.
Yeah,
but I won't even go to that level of calling her an a-hole. It's frustrating, and she's got a lot on her plate.
It's like he made a dumb mistake, an easy mistake to make, especially given, okay, the coupon is for shampoo, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I could easily see myself doing something like that and saying, well, I mean, it was on the coupon, so I thought you actually did want 2 shampoos, but on the other hand, if, they're together for 13 years, so when she says, I feel like he should know me better, it's not like not knowing somebody's deep hidden secrets, not knowing what they actually use in their shower. I mean, some people are just kind of oblivious, but I don't know. I mean, I know what my wife uses, and we've been, it'll be 13 years this year. So, I don't know. I think that he probably should know her better, and he did make the mistake, and then he said he was going to remedy it, and he didn't remedy it. Now, all the other stuff about like my mental load is over the top. I don't know. That to me, that's kind of like distraction. It doesn't seem to add anything useful to the story to me. It makes it sound like she's adding stuff in to either protect herself from being an a-hole or to make it look worse for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think she shouldn't be mad at him, but I'm also not quite to the point where I would call her an a-hole just for being mad.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting because I found this one, the whole Reddit divides things up into those 4 slots that you talked about. So this is from the slot of people labeling her the a-hole. So your view is that they've gone, I think I agree, they've gone too far in labeling her that way.
I agree. Like, miscommunication at most. To get to an a-hole, you gotta be really doing something wrong, I think.
Yeah. I mean, before we move on from this, so these sorts of things are bound to arise in a marriage or any romantic relationship, most likely in a business relationship with somebody else, coworkers, employees and bosses, colleagues, neighbors, friends, roommates, right? So, what can we draw from this and like how you ought to handle little conflicts? I mean, this is a small thing, right? Buying shampoo and conditioner so it doesn't fester. Maybe this is the sort of thing where they should be talking to each other more and working these things out rather than going on Reddit to solicit the opinions of strangers.
I agree. Like, just having a deeper conversation at the very beginning of this would have resolved the issue in the first place. And maybe the post-action report is, hey, in the future, could you please do this? Instead of getting too upset about it, it's like, okay, it's done.
Right.
How do you move on forward with your hopefully loving relationship, especially because you have kids and whatnot? And like, don't let this thing be the splinter that it festers.
I think that's a great metaphor, because as opposed to like a cut or something like that, a splinter gets under your skin, and I mean, either your body like pushes it out, which I guess would be sort of equivalent to you like you just get over it, right? Or it stays under there and you get infected, and pretty soon you got to dig in there with the tweezers or maybe even cut it open, and that's pretty painful. So.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Next one is, am I the a-hole for not giving my stepdaughter an inheritance? My husband, who is 32, passed away earlier this year. Our children are 6 and 3, and I inherited his entire estate, which is in total worth almost $1 million. When he was in high school, my husband had a child who is currently 16 years old with his girlfriend at the time. He broke up with his girlfriend once he found out she was pregnant, saying he wasn't ready to be a father yet. He visited her maybe once every few years when he was alive. My stepdaughter and her mother are very poor. They have struggled financially ever since my husband's death, as they no longer receive child support. They're struggling to pay rent and risk getting evicted. My stepdaughter reached out to me begging for her share of the inheritance. I feel bad for her, but my husband clearly stated in his will that he wanted to leave his estate to me and the children only. I barely even know my stepdaughter. I don't think it's my responsibility to take care of her. She's furious with me, calling me a heartless gold digger and saying that giving her money was the least I could do to make up for the years of neglect. Am I the a-hole?
Boy, there's a lot to unpack in this one, I think.
The first thing is, the husband was an a-hole for basically abandoning a child and only seeing her once a year or something. Like, and I assume that it is said that there was financial assistance, so I assume that he has alimony or child support that he has to pay to the mother of his child and his daughter, and now that he's dead, he's gone. And I guess the first thing is, I think there's laws about that with estates. Isn't there something along the lines of?
I don't think so. I think what the stepdaughter would have to do would be to go to court and argue that she should get some of the inheritance, but not that child support would continue or anything like that. And it's expensive and time consuming to go to court. So if she's already in financial difficulties, she's probably not going to be able to afford to hire a lawyer and do all of those sorts of things. But I think you're right. The fact that he It says that he visited her once every few years while he was alive. That's kind of a jerk move, Plus, he broke up with his girlfriend once he found out she was pregnant, saying he wasn't ready to be a father yet. Well, if you get somebody pregnant, you are ready to be a father, It's just whether you're going to step up to your duties or not. So he kind of shirked his duties. I mean, he did pay his child support, but that's really the minimum, I think, as a parent.
Right. As your state implied or imposed obligation.
Yeah. Now, working backwards, right? This notion of giving the stepdaughter money was the least that the wife could do to make up for years of neglect. Do you actually have a duty to make up for somebody else's shortcomings? I don't think you have a moral duty in that case.
I tend to agree that there's not a direct moral duty.
Yeah.
But it's close because that was your spouse, and up until that point, especially if you had like shared finances, the money that would have been coming in from him was part of their shared finances, and coming out of their shared finances, and so there's.
Yeah, but that doesn't make you liable for paying for somebody else's kid who you didn't have any role in creating. I mean, the number $1 million, so that's a big estate, right? I think if you're inheriting $1 million and the goal is you want to take care of your kids and also like have a nest egg, she could easily set aside $50,000 out of that and say, you're going to get this lump sum. Make sure you use it well, because you're not getting any more like monthly child support. And $50,000, if they are really poor, $50,000 is life-changing money. So It's not as if like she only got $50,000 in the inheritance and this kid is begging for it or something like that. She's got plenty of money, and she could give some of that. And I think this is a good example of something that in ethics we call a supererogatory duty, meaning you're literally asking for something above super, and we say above and beyond, right? So she doesn't have a strict obligation to share this money, but it would be a good thing for her to do. She would be acting benevolently, helping somebody out who she says is struggling financially, right? Struggling to pay rent and risking getting evicted. That's scary stuff. You could easily create happiness and alleviate misery, if we're thinking about this like in a utilitarian kind of way, by doing that. And I won't say it costs you nothing. It costs whatever money you give, but it's kind of a windfall. Right? I mean, She wasn't getting that money anyway. So.
Yeah, I guess part of me, when you say that you're not getting that money anyway, I don't know exactly where this inheritance is. Was it like stocks and bonds that he had invested, or if this was part of like a life insurance plan? Life insurance plan, obviously, then your assertion would be correct. They wouldn't have had the money anyways.
Yeah, so what you're saying is if it was like stocks and bonds, because they're married...
it was hers anyways.
It depends on the state, though. Like, the state that we live in, Wisconsin, is a marital property state. So, which is very nice, because if somebody does die, well, you get their stuff, right? So you don't have to screw around with probate courts and stuff like that. But I want to say that, like, even like Illinois, just to the south of us, I don't think that's the case there. It works out to the advantage of the state if you have to go to probate, because the state always winds up taking some of it somewhere down the line, right?
So.
But so let's assume that it's something that either she didn't know that they had, or it wasn't hers and their kids. So
then, I would say that I'd agree that it's not an obligation, but it is would be an excellent or benevolent thing to do for someone that is, at least directly connected to the person who died.
Yeah.
And the fact that the father said that he wanted to give the money only to his wife and 2 children, he's dead. After they're dead, they can do whatever the heck they want with the money.
Yeah.
See, they're not locked in. It seems like she's trying to use this. Oh, well, this is what he wanted. Well, now it's your money. You can do it with it however you like. Do you want to do this or not?
That's right. And I think it's interesting. So she's getting called a gold digger, right? And if you are a gold digger, the implication is that you're doing things from purely selfish or egoistic motives. You didn't really care about the person that you were involved in. You just wanted their money or assets or whatever it is that they were providing you with. Now, if she was just a heartless gold digger, she wouldn't give the money. So that's one possibility. And then the other possibility is she doesn't give the money because she's too beholden, as you were saying, to her dead husband's wishes. In which case, she's not a gold digger. She's actually following what somebody else has declared that he wants, but she's doing so in a way that's kind of thoughtless and maybe too rigid, right? And so the third possibility would be to be a compassionate person and say, you're not going to get even half of this or even 1/10 of this, but I can give you 1/20 of this share and really help you get on your feet. And you're not going to get anything after this, but this will get you through the time that you're in, Yeah,
it's, I don't know, it feels like she's grasping at straws in order to make herself feel okay for keeping the money.
Okay.
But I might be reading into it, but that, with this last thing saying that the father intends for this money to go to these things.
Yeah.
She's like, oh yes, well that means I get more money anyways.
Yeah. I mean, it could be that she is really selfish and, in which case calling somebody a gold digger, though, usually we think that, it's somebody who comes in from the outside, they're not going to spend a lot of time with that person. She's clearly spent at least 6 years with the guy. Well, maybe 7 because they got a 6-year-old kid. So I don't know. That doesn't seem like, it seems like something that's just being said to be hurtful and mean.
Yeah. The first daughter sounds to be hurt and is lashing out.
Yeah. Well, we got another one about husbands. Am I the a-hole for wanting my husband to do a home drug test? Now, before you read the scenario, I would say, in general, the answer to that would be yes. But when we read this one, especially the first line, I think that might change our point of view. I've walked in on him doing cocaine 3 different times and found baggies at our home throughout our marriage. We've been married 7 years and have 2 kids. Each time I've caught him, he denies it even when I see it with my own eyes. Anyways, over the past few months, I've had suspicions of him using again, but haven't said anything, just watching his behavior. Well, last night he went to the gas station and he comes back home, straight to the bathroom, locks the door, turns on the fan, runs the faucet, and I can hear him sniffing. He wouldn't open the door for me when I knocked and told me I'm crazy for thinking he's doing anything wrong. He also got super mad when I asked him to do a home drug test, which I already had a few ready at home. I figure if he's not hiding something, he would do it no problem. Am I the a-hole? Update. The test was positive, and I told him he needs to leave. Thanks, everyone, for confirming my thoughts. So, this is actually labeled under not the a-hole, and I think that's completely right. This seems, in the situation, quite reasonable behavior on her part, and he's clearly doing shady stuff. So, I think he's clearly an a-hole. I mean, if you're a drug addict and you know you've got a problem and you've already been caught before and you're in a marriage with somebody and they say, hey, are you doing coke? I think you need to take a test. You really, at that point, ought to say, wow, what's wrong with me? Yes, I am doing it. I need to get treatment, not just for my relationship with you, but they got 2 kids together. So
right. I totally agree. She's not the a-hole. This is kind of interesting because there was another one that we decided not to go with, which was about a cousin or a sibling who stages an intervention for the OP because she made assumptions about him using a prescribed medical thing with the syringe. He had like a medication that he had to use for a syringe, and he didn't want to share with her what was in the syringe, and it wasn't her business.
That's interesting.
Jumped directly to, hey, I need to stage an intervention. And when he walks into the intervention, he laughs. and it's like, was I the a-hole for laughing at this situation? Like, no.
That's one of those cases where we'd say you skipped a couple steps to her, right?
It's almost like a sitcom scenario.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, a lot of those... what makes for good drama is people jumping to conclusions and then acting on it. As a matter of fact, if you don't mind a little bit of a digression. Mm-hmm. So we were watching the latest episodes of Cobra Kai the other day. Mm-hmm. And I'd kind of quit watching it for a while, in part because I got so tired of every single episode. It is like a soap opera. Somebody sees something happening. Everything's going fine for a while, and then somebody sees something, and they jump to a conclusion. They don't ask the other person, and then they react to it, and then the other person gets mad, and then everybody's fighting again, right? Mm-hmm. And it just keeps changing the who's mad at who sort of thing. So you get new alliances and all that. And after a while, you're like, this same damn stuff again over and over and over. Write some better plots, Right. So, and to be fair, they do have redemption arcs in there, and revelations recently about Mr. Miyagi wasn't everything that we thought he was. So,
they're ruining Mr. Miyagi's good name. But it feels like, what is it? The karate of our lives.
There you go. Yeah. So I don't know. I think cases like that, going back to you see somebody shooting up their medication and you're like, ooh, they're a druggie. I better stage an intervention. There's got to be other stuff going on, and it's most likely not on the part of the person who's asking, am I the a-hole? It's on that weird relative's part.
And so, going back to this one, why is the husband here an a-hole? Well, the first thing is he's lying to his wife.
About doing cocaine.
Yes, exactly. And it's not like she doesn't know that. It's just, there's so many things he's doing wrong here.
Yeah.
And he's obviously trying to, I don't want her to know, but I do, it's terrible.
And I'm going to say something that's going to sound a little bit silly to some people, but cocaine is quite expensive. So if you're going to be doing an illegal drug and hiding it from your family, you should probably do something that's cheap, like pot, You shouldn't be going out there buying cocaine. Now, I'm not going to say you should, do meth because that's probably cheaper than cocaine. These things kind of fluctuate because meth is very bad for you. But, yes. If you had to pick...
Don't do drugs, kids.
Yeah, if you had to pick a drug, that you're going to hide the fact that you're blowing your family's money on, I don't think cocaine's the smart one to do, So.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it. You're now reducing your family's finances.
That's right, yeah.
Doing a rather expensive job. Like, you have an obligation as a spouse and a parent to make sure that, things are running well enough in your home, and he's probably skirting that unless he's like, I don't know, some sort of a high-priced lawyer or a stock market
well, in
trader.
that case, all he's doing is supplying income to the family, but he's, if you're going to the gas station to score some Coke and then going in the bathroom and turning on the fan, running the faucet, snorting it, not opening the door, you're clearly not like giving your kids bath time or folding towels or any of the stuff you probably ought to be helping out with,
Right. Let's move on to the next one. Okay. Am I the a-hole for ruining dinner by calling my wife's friend's, quote, Virgo moment a tantrum? My wife's oldest friend's birthday was yesterday, and so their friendship group threw her birthday dinner at a restaurant. I was invited as +1. So full transparency, I've never really liked this friend. She's always seemed too dramatic and over the top for me. Always attributed everything to her star sign. Insufferable comes to mind if I were to use one word. That said, I usually just ignore her and let her be whatever we're in the same room. Because why not? Yesterday, though, she was making a big deal because they got her dessert order wrong. To be frank, we did wait like 45 minutes for it to arrive, so I get that, but she was just complaining to the group and then stopped herself, and then she was going to have a Virgo moment, whatever the heck that means, and I said under my breath, but clearly too audibly, "You mean a tantrum?" She asked me to repeat myself, and the cat was clearly already out of the bag, so I did. She asked what I meant by that, and I explained that there's no such thing as a Virgo moment, just a grown person throwing a tantrum, which devolved into a back and forth that ruined the mood and resulted in us leaving early. I don't think calling it a tantrum was wrong because it is one, but choosing to speak up at her birthday dinner is probably where I dropped the ball and screwed up. I was calm throughout and didn't escalate things, but even then it didn't have to be said because there were really no outcome where things would have worked out well. Am I the a-hole? Just some more information. Saw this come up a couple times, so I thought I'd explain. I would because my wife asked me and all the partners were there, and the dinner was paid for by the friend group. She wasn't screaming and throwing plates, but she was really hammering down and complaining about this and had to keep getting stopped going to the kitchen despite them apologizing throughout for the delay in the mix-up. So I think this last bit gives a little context that I think was needed. Because at first it just sounds like she's complaining at the table. And it's like, okay, whatever, you're grumbling at the table. But if you're having to be restrained from proceeding into the kitchen at a restaurant to voice your complaints directly to them in a place that you should not be allowed for a number of reasons,
health code,
then that's going to be a place where you're outside of the normal bounds, and to call it a tantrum is probably not incorrect at that point in time. But I do kind of agree that, probably wasn't the best place to say it. And he might have been more tactful about it, but she was definitely, I'd say more the a-hole than him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a few... So let's assume this story is completely true. There's a few points where I think he says things that clearly make it seem like he's trying to be measured. So he says it under his breath, but too audibly, "You mean a tantrum." So he's saying it to himself, but he gets overheard, right? And then she asks him to repeat himself. Now, she's the one who's asking him to repeat himself, right? And so he just says the word, and then she goes on and says, "What do you mean by that?" Right? So she's kind of poking, kind of manufacturing, I think, the drama. And then, he says I was calm throughout and didn't escalate things. Okay, well, that's really good because he could have, and then he would have been like her, who seems pretty interested in having the drama. I'm kind of curious, though, switching topic a little bit. I've never heard anybody say a Virgo moment, or I've never heard anybody say this with a Taurus moment or a Leo moment or any of that sort of stuff. I've heard people sometimes say, well, I'm a such and such, and that's the way we behave to justify their behavior. But have you ever heard anybody use that expression?
Not directly, but as you said, I definitely heard all. I think Leo's a fire sign or something. I don't know, they're fiery, or maybe I don't know what the signs
well, I
are.
can tell you because I'm a Leo. So the stereotype of a Leo is that they're very vain and need a lot of people looking at them, and they want people.
How many subscribers do you have on your YouTube currently?
About 150,000, but I've worked for it. And I don't go out of my way to, I mean, if I really was behaving like a Leo, I'd probably have 1 million, because I would just say whatever's going to be popular at the time. So, I mean, there are people who do behave that way, but is it more people that are born within this particular month of things? I mean, I don't think so.
No. And I feel like whenever you say that, it's a cop-out. Especially here, it's like, oh, I'm going to do something that would be considered really bad manners.
Yeah.
And then just say like, oh, well, this is my star sign, therefore that's how I have to act in this moment. And it seems like it's using this as like a get out of bad actions free card.
I think you're right. Yeah. And, so clearly you and I don't think that astrology determines a person's character or something like that. There's probably some things where we'd be more willing to cut somebody slack. Like, if we knew that somebody had a traumatic brain injury and they were prone to fits of anger, I think we might be like, well, you got to understand, ever since they came back from Iraq, they're having trouble with this sort of thing. But I don't think that we would excuse it and say, yeah, it's fine for you to go running into the kitchen to try to get your dessert or something like that, right?
Yeah, it explains but does not excuse.
Oh, that's a good distinction there. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you ever want to dig more into this, look up Phineas Gage.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, tell that story a little bit.
Okay, so Phineas Gage was a gentleman who was working in the railroads. I think he was like a supervisor, and there was I believe it was an explosion of some sort of small, maybe steam pump or something, and it shot funnily enough by his name, a piece of metal like rebar on which has a certain gauge. That's the joke. Up through, I think, about here
that
on his chin.
Yeah.
And then out the top of his head. But it was also like red hot, and so it like cauterized everything really well as it went out. And he spent a couple days in the hospital, but then made a full recovery. But his personality significantly changed because it went like right through his like prefrontal cortex, which is a lot of places where we tend to have the areas where we curtail some of our more baser ideas. It's emotional regulation and thought regulation goes on there, and so it used to be like really mild mannered and fairly like clean living, but then afterwards he was like a womanizer and a gambler and a drunk, and he became much more mean. Like his entire personality changed, and so like we have an explanation of why he's doing these actions, but it does not excuse the bad actions themselves.
Yeah, I mean, in a case like that, we might be inclined to say, well, he was placed at a great disadvantage compared to the rest of us. But, people who, people say, well, I was abused as a child. People beat me, and that's why I beat my children. You could say, well, you have a choice there. You can not do that sort of thing. It may be tougher for you. There may be dynamics and habits that you easily fall into, but you still do have some measure of choice. So, a Virgo moment. I mean, it sounds like she's been using this as an excuse for a long time, right?
Yeah, you don't pull that right out of the back of your back pocket like that. I feel like that is not a construction made up on the fly.
Yeah. Well, should we move on to the next one? Another domestic one. Am I the a-hole for telling my nurse boyfriend that adults work full time? I and my boyfriend, and these are people in their late 20s, have been together 4 years, and we met working direct patient care jobs in the medical field. A couple years after we started dating, he finally got his associates in nursing so he could work as a nurse, which he did full-time for a year. In the meantime, I started grad school and worked full-time as a chemist while working on my master's until going back to school full-time as a PhD candidate with a cost of living stipend and working 45 to 60 hours a week between TAing, coursework, and lab research. Last year, he decided he wanted to focus on online school more so that he could complete his bachelor's degree in nursing, so he cut back his hours to 2 12-hour days a week. I fully support this because I understand from experience how difficult working full-time and being a student is. However, he is about to finish his final class before completing his BSN and wants to remain part-time, so he has more time off. I really don't like this because he has been struggling to pay his part of the bills while working part-time since I'm not making any more than him. I don't think that working 3 days a week, even 12-hour shifts, is too much to take time to see family and friends, especially with PTO since he already has much more time off than me. He also has a lot of debt or to pay off, so I worry about him making excuses to not work. I told him, quote, "Real adults work full-time jobs. Welcome to the real world." And he told me, I don't know what it's like to work and be a student. Even though I did do that full-time for a year before going for my PhD, he got very upset and stormed off. Was I too harsh? Am I the a-hole? So what do you think?
Well, you've read. You start.
Okay, well, I don't think she's an a-hole at all. As a matter of fact, I think she's being pretty diplomatic because she could have said a lot harsher things and probably, given if the situation is the way that she describes it, would have been justified in saying them, I think. And it was foolish of him to tell her, who's working more than him, that she doesn't know what it's like to work and be a student, She's, like she says, she's working anywhere from 45 to 60 hours a week between TAing, coursework, and lab research. Okay, so the coursework is part of being a student. And then TAing, that's how you earn your money as a PhD student. That's how you get your stipend and all that. And lab work is part of that as well. So I don't know. I'm inclined to think that, it's interesting because the verdict was everybody sucks. I don't think she sucks. I think he does. Mm-hmm. If he has a lot of debt and there are going to be a couple together, he should be doing stuff to pay off that debt. And, she's asking him to work 3 days a week with 12-hour shifts. That's only 36 hours a week. And, so let's add in travel time and getting ready and all that. Okay, so it's probably like 45 hours a week. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you can't get stuff done, like visiting family and friends and taking care of housework and all that, and you're working 40 hours a week, something's going on,
Right. So I guess I agree. I guess my only caveat to what she was saying is she didn't say that she's had these conversations with him.
Oh,
and
okay.
Maybe that's
yeah.
trying to be implied. So if she just, jumps to, saying, quote, welcome to the real world, adults work full time, that seems like an escalation of, hey, exactly saying what you were saying. Like, hey, we're trying to be a couple. Our finances are tied together. And especially if you are wanting to get married, then your debts become my debts. And I'd rather we both be working on making sure that we have a financially stable future together. Maybe he's assuming that once she becomes a doctor, that won't be an issue. But I don't know. That's not part of it. That's just me speculating.
Well, I think something, too, that figures into this is they're nurses. And, nurses, on the whole, tend to be pretty blunt, right? In part because they often have to, because they're often dealing with people who are engaging in wishful thinking about their health and stuff like that, and they have to tell people to do things that they don't want to do. So I kind of feel like they've been together 4 years. It would make sense that they're rather blunt with each other about stuff. So, welcome to the real world seems like the sort of thing you might say on a nursing shift anyway. Somebody complains about, oh, my feet hurt. Well, welcome to the real world. It's sort of like being in the army. People are not going to cut you a lot of slack. So, I mean, if they were...
Suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah, exactly. Embrace the suck, Another day in paradise is another catchphrase. So I don't know. I mean, that would go to making it less of a bad thing to say to him. He got very upset, stormed off.
The only place that the consensus was that everyone sucks.
Yeah.
The only place I could see that is if she it went from 0 to 60 in that, except for this idea of being really blunt.
Yeah.
Especially it's your partner, and I have no idea what their usual back and forth is. If their usual back and forth is kind of, blunt like that already, then that seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to say. If their usual back and forth is rather kind and deferential and whatnot, that seems to be an escalation outside of the norm. And that's the only place that I could see that being problematic.
I mean, it is clear that they do talk to each other, and that she has been supportive of him cutting back his hours to 24 hours a week in the past. She says she understands how difficult working full-time and being a student is. And I would assume, so she says he's been struggling to pay his part of the bills. I would assume that she's probably talked with him about that,
And especially because she's just on a PhD, living stipend, so she's not making much.
Right,
doing
exactly.
that work.
Yeah.
So I assume that she's feeling very crunched or squeezed in the finances department. That's causing her some consternation. And so I'd say, if he wants to be a good partner, then he should suck it up. And do at least 3 shifts a week, as she's asking, so that they can actually make their ends meet.
Yeah, and 3 shifts a week, to me, doesn't seem, especially for people who are in their 20s. They're in their late 20s. Asking somebody who's 65, take on 36 hours a week, of 12-hour shifts. Okay, that might be too much, right? But I don't know, younger people.
It's got to be. But regardless of that, we need to end the show. And so we're going to let you off with the words of
Lewis Black.
Yes, Lewis Black. There are 2 things I know about life. Only the good die young, but the jerks live forever.